We've identified legacy roles that can be replaced at 40% less cost. That's what Colin Reeves said at exactly 4:42 p.m., standing at the front of the room like he was presenting a quarterly win instead of ending someone's career. I remember the slide behind him. Clean. Simple. Numbers in blue. A neat little chart showing savings. And right there, in the middle of it, a line that didn't say my name, but it might as well have. Legacy Operations Lead. That was me. My name is. Edward was 47 years old at the time. I had been with that company for 13 years. I built most of the systems that room depended on, even if they didn't know it. And in that moment, none of that mattered. The room went quiet after he said it. Not a shocked silence. Not a confused silence. The kind of silence where people already know what's happening and they don't want to be part of it. I was sitting halfway down the long glass table. Legal was to my left. HR was across from me. The CEO sat at the head, hands folded, looking down at printed notes like he had already decided everything before the meeting even started. No one looked at me. Colin clicked to the next slide like nothing happened. We're moving toward a more scalable structure, he continued, reducing dependency on individual contributors and shifting towards standardized processes. Standardized processes. That's what he called it. I'd spent over a decade holding together systems that were never designed to scale. Systems that broke in ways no textbook could explain. Systems that needed someone who knew their history, their weak points, their habits. But to him, I was just dependency. Something to remove. He kept talking. Charts. Numbers. Efficiency. Cost reduction. And then he said the part that made it real. We've already identified a replacement profile aligned with this new direction. Replacement. Not transition. Not support. Replacement. That's when I finally looked up at the screen again. There was a photo now. A headshot. Ethan Cole. MBA. Systems Strategy Specialist. 29 years old. Polished smile. Perfect resume. The kind of guy who knows how to speak in meetings, but has never had to fix something at 2:13 a.m. when everything is down and no one else knows where to start. Colin kept going like he was introducing a new product. Ethan brings a fresh perspective, modern frameworks, and a scalable mindset. I almost laughed at that. Not out loud, just in my head. Because nothing about our systems was modern. Nothing about them was clean. They were layered, fragile, full of small decisions made over years to keep things running. Things you don't put in documentation because they only make sense after you've lived with them. But none of that showed up on a slide. I looked around the room again. HR was typing something. Not looking up. Legal was staring at their laptop. The CFO leaned back, arms crossed, watching Colin like he was impressed. And the CEO? Still not looking at me. He just nodded once. That was enough. 13 years reduced to a single nod. I didn't say anything. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because I understood the room. This wasn't a discussion. It was a decision. And I had already been removed from it. Colin finally paused and looked around. Any questions? No one spoke. Not one person. Not even me. Because what was the point? The plan was already in motion. The replacement already hired. The story already written. I just hadn't been told until now. The meeting moved on after that. Other topics. Budgets. Forecasts. Roadmaps. Normal business. Like nothing had just happened. But I barely heard any of it. Because in that moment, something very clear settled in my mind. They thought I was just a cost. A line on a spreadsheet. Something you could swap out for someone cheaper. They didn't understand what they were actually replacing. And the worst part? They were completely confident about it. That was the moment I realized something important. Not angry, not emotional, just clear. They had no idea what they had just done. And for the first time in 13 years, I stopped feeling responsible for protecting them from it. When I say I spent 13 years at that company, I don't mean I just showed up and did a job. I mean I built things, real things, the kind that don't look impressive in a presentation, but hold everything together behind the scenes. I joined when the company was still small, back when systems meant a few servers, some patch software, and a lot of manual work. Nothing was clean, nothing was stable, but it worked because someone stayed close to it. That someone became me. Over time, I didn't just maintain the system. I shaped it. I learned where it broke, where it slowed down, where it depended on things no one else even noticed. I fixed problems before they became outages. I created workarounds when vendors failed. I built small internal tools that never made it into official documentation, but saved hours every week. Most of it lived in my head, not because I wanted it that way, but because that's how the system grew, layer by layer, patch by patch, decision by decision. There were nights I slept on the office couch because something went down at midnight, and I knew it would take hours to fix. There were weekends I canceled plans because a client's system started failing and no one else knew how to stabilize it. No one asked me to do those things, but I did them anyway, because I believed I was building something that mattered. And for a long time, it did. The company grew. Revenue increased. Clients stayed. And most people in that building never had to think about why things worked. They just worked. What they didn't see were the fragile points. The places where one small change could trigger a chain reaction. The old integrations that still ran critical processes. The manual overrides that kept certain systems from collapsing under load. The vendor relationships I maintained personally because official support channels were too slow. Those things don't show up in reports. They don't fit into clean diagrams. But they're the difference between smooth operations and complete failure. I remember one night about 6 years in. It was around 2:10 a.m. A major client system went down. Something deep in the transaction pipeline. Nothing obvious. No clear error. The kind of issue that spreads quietly. By the time alerts triggered, it was already affecting live operations. I was the only one who knew where to look. Not because I was smarter, but because I had seen a similar pattern years before and remembered the conditions. It took me 3 hours to stabilize it. 3 hours of tracing logs, testing fixes, and making small adjustments that would never make sense to anyone reading them later. By morning, everything was back up. Clients didn't even notice. Leadership never knew how close it came to failure. And that became the pattern. Problems solved before they became visible. Risk handled before it turned into loss. Quiet work. Invisible value. And over time, that became normal. Expected but never recognized. At home, things were simpler but heavier. I had a mortgage. Nothing fancy, but steady. My daughter was in college. Tuition wasn't cheap. My wife trusted that the long hours meant stability. That staying loyal to one company for over a decade meant something. I believed that too. I thought consistency mattered. I thought being reliable had value. So I stayed, even when other offers came. Even when I knew I could probably earn more somewhere else. Because I thought I was part of something that respected what I brought. Looking back, I realized something. They didn't see the system the way I did. To them, it was a set of functions. Inputs, outputs, performance metrics. Something you could measure, optimize, and replace. To me, it was something alive. Something that needed context. Memory. Experience. You can't hand that off in a few meetings. You can't replace it with a resume. But that's exactly what they believed. And the moment they made that decision, everything that depended on that understanding started to become a risk. They just didn't know it yet. I did. And for the first time in a long time, I stopped trying to explain it. 2 days after that meeting, I got the email. Subject line was simple. Clean. Like everything else they did. Knowledge transition plan. No acknowledgement. No conversation. Just a schedule attached with time blocks labeled handoff sessions. And at the top of that schedule was a name I had already seen on that slide. Ethan Cole. We met for the first time that Monday morning. He walked into my office with a laptop, a notebook, and that same confident smile from his headshot. Edward, right? He said, reaching out his hand. I've heard a lot about you. I shook his hand. Not as much as you think, I said. He laughed like it was a joke. It wasn't. We sat down, and I started where I always start when someone new joins the team. High-level overview. System flow. Key dependencies. But within the first 10 minutes, I could already see the gap. Not intelligence. He was smart, but experience. He asked the right questions on the surface. What's the main data pipeline here? Where do we handle failover? How do we scale during peak? Good questions. Clean questions. The kind you learn to ask in school or in consulting frameworks. But they didn't go deep enough. They didn't touch the parts that actually mattered. So I showed him. I walked him through one of our older systems. something that looked stable on paper but had 3 separate manual overrides built into it over the years. "Why is this here?" he asked, pointing at a section of code. "Because 5 years ago, a vendor update broke our transaction timing," I said. "This keeps it from failing under load." "Is that documented?" "No." He paused, typing something into his notes. "We should clean that up," he said. I looked at him for a second. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe it's the only reason it still works." He nodded, but I could tell he didn't really accept that answer. To him, anything undocumented was a problem. To me, it was reality. That pattern repeated itself over and over. I would explain something built from years of trial and error. He would try to fit it into a clean model. Something structured, something scalable, but the system wasn't built that way. And more importantly, no one had given him the time to understand why. Because leadership didn't want understanding. They wanted speed. Every few days, I get another email from Colin. "Let's keep the transition efficient. Focus on critical components only. We're aiming for full handoff within 4 weeks." For weeks. It took me years to understand those systems, and they wanted to compress that into a month. So I adjusted. I gave them exactly what they asked for. No more, no less. I showed Ethan the documented processes. I walked him through the official workflows. I explained the standard procedures. But I stopped going beyond that. I didn't dive into the edge cases unless he asked. I didn't volunteer the hidden fixes. I didn't explain every workaround I had built over the years. Not out of spite, just alignment. If they believed the system could be understood at a surface level, then that's what I would give them. There were moments where I almost stepped in. Moments where I saw him miss something important. Like the time he reviewed a batch process and said, "This looks redundant. We can probably remove it." I knew exactly what that process did. It caught a rare timing issue that only showed up under very specific conditions. Something that had caused a major failure years ago. I could have explained it. I could have told him the whole story. Instead, I asked a simple question. "What happens if it's not redundant?" He shrugged. "We'll monitor it." Monitor it. That was the difference. I fixed things before they broke. He planned to react after they did. And leadership supported that approach. Because it sounded efficient. Because it looked modern. By the 3rd week, the sessions started getting shorter. Not because we were done, but because they believed we were. Ethan became more confident. He started speaking in meetings about system simplification and removing legacy complexity. Colin nodded along. The CEO started including him in higher-level discussions. And I sat there, watching it happen. Not angry, just aware, because I could already see where the cracks were forming. Small things, details being skipped, assumptions being made, pieces being removed without fully understanding why they were there in the first place. And no one slowed down. No one asked if maybe there was more beneath the surface. Because to them, this was progress. Clean, efficient, controlled. What they didn't see was how much of that control was built on things they were now ignoring. By the final week, my calendar was almost empty. No more sessions scheduled. No more questions coming in. Just a quiet understanding that my time there was almost over. Ethan stopped asking for help. Not because he didn't need it, but because he believed he didn't. And that was the moment I knew something for sure. They weren't replacing my role. They were removing the understanding that made the role work. And once that was gone, there was nothing left to protect them from what came next. My final week didn't come with any announcement. No team meeting. No send-off. No acknowledgement of the years I'd spent there. Just another email from HR. Separation package attached. Please review and confirm. That was it. 13 years reduced to a document with bullet points and a signature line. I read through it once. Standard terms. A few weeks of severance. A clause about not discussing internal systems. Nothing personal. Nothing that reflected what I had actually done there. I signed it the same day. Not because I agreed with it, but because I understood something they didn't. I was already gone. The rest was just paperwork. That last week felt quiet. Not peaceful. Just empty. People avoided longer conversations. Short greetings. Quick check-ins. Like no one wanted to stand too close to someone who was leaving under those conditions. Ethan had already moved into a more central role. His calendar was full. Meetings with leadership. Planning sessions. He looked busy. Important. I watched him walk past my office one afternoon, talking confidently about streamlining operations. He didn't notice me, or maybe he chose not to. Either way, it didn't matter. By Thursday, I had cleared out most of my things. A few folders, some notebooks, a coffee mug I had used for years. The office itself didn't hold much. Most of what I had built was never physical. It lived in systems, in decisions, in patterns no one else had taken the time to learn. Friday morning, I came in early, same as I always did, out of habit more than anything. I logged into the system one last time, checked the dashboards, looked at the overnight reports, and that's when I saw it. A small inconsistency. Nothing major, at least not yet. A slight delay in one of the background processes. Something that would normally fix itself. But not always. I had seen this before. Years ago, it was one of those issues that only mattered under certain conditions. The kind of thing you ignore at first, until it grows, until it connects with something else, until it becomes a problem no one can trace back easily. I knew exactly what to do. It would take maybe 10 minutes. A quick adjustment, a small manual correction, something no one would ever notice. Just like all the other times. I sat there looking at it, cursor blinking on the screen, waiting. For a moment, it felt automatic, like muscle memory. Fix it. Move on. That's what I had done for 13 years. Protect the system. Protect the company. Even when they didn't see it. Even when they didn't understand it. Even when they decided I was replaceable. My hand stayed on the mouse. But I didn't move. Because something had changed. Not the system. Not the issue. Me. For the first time, I asked myself a simple question. Is this still my responsibility? And the answer came faster than I expected. No, not anymore. They had made that clear. They had built a plan around removing me. They had told the room I was a cost to be reduced. They had replaced me with someone who, in their eyes, could handle everything moving forward. So I leaned back in my chair, and I did something I had never done before. I left it, not out of anger, not to prove a point, just because it wasn't mine to carry anymore. I logged out of the system, shut down my computer, picked up the last of my things, and walked out of that office without saying anything to anyone. No speech, no final conversation, no looking back. As I stepped outside, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not relief, not satisfaction, just clarity. The system I had protected for over a decade was now in the hands of people who believed they understood it. People who believed it could be simplified, standardized, replaced. And maybe they were right. Maybe everything would work perfectly without me. But I knew something they didn't. That small inconsistency I saw that morning, it wasn't going to fix itself. And once it started to grow, it would connect with other things. Things no one had explained. Things no one had documented. Things no one had even noticed. I walked to my car, set my bag in the passenger seat, and sat there for a moment, just listening to the silence. For 13 years, I had been the one who stepped in before things broke. The one who kept problems from becoming visible. But that chapter was over. Now, they were on their own. And for the first time, I wasn't going to stop what was coming. The first few days after I left felt normal on the surface. At least, that's what they probably told themselves. From the outside, nothing changed. The dashboards still showed green. The reports still came in on time. Meetings still happened. But I knew how fragile that normal really was. Because normal in that system was never stable. It was just carefully maintained. And I wasn't there to maintain it anymore. I didn't hear anything directly from the company at first. No calls. No emails. That made sense. In their minds, I was already replaced. Ethan Cole was now the face of operations. The modern solution. The scalable talent. But I still had contact with a few people inside the team. Not close friends. Just colleagues who couldn't fully disconnect from the habit of reaching out. On the third day, I got a message from Mark in infrastructure. Short. Casual. Hey, small issue with batch timing. Nothing major yet. Nothing major. That phrase used to mean something very specific. It meant it was already happening. Just not visible enough to panic leadership. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't see it, but because I knew what I would have done before. I would have jumped in immediately. I would have traced it, fixed it, stabilized it, and moved on like nothing happened. And they would have never known it even broke. But I wasn't doing that anymore. By the end of that week, I got another message. this time from someone in client support. Clients are noticing slight delays in processing. We're handling it internally. Internally. That word always meant they were trying to contain something they didn't fully understand yet. Still manageable. Still quiet. But not for long. I sat at home that evening, just reading those messages without responding. There was no satisfaction in it. No anger either. Just awareness. Because I knew the pattern. First, small delays. Then, mismatched outputs. Then, pressure building in places no one was monitoring closely enough. Then, panic. It never failed. The system didn't break suddenly. It unraveled. Slowly. Piece by piece. On Monday morning, I heard something bigger. Not officially. Through a former colleague who still worked late shifts. Ethan had been pulled into multiple emergency meetings. Leadership was reviewing system performance. That's what they called it when things were starting to slip. Reviewing. A soft word for scrambling. I asked one question in reply. Did anyone isolate the batch dependency issue? There was a pause before he responded. No one seemed sure where it's coming from. That told me everything. Because I knew exactly where it was coming from. But knowing and fixing are two different things. And I wasn't part of fixing anymore. By midweek, the tone inside the company changed. I didn't need direct access to hear it. People talk, especially when things start going wrong. The confidence that had replaced me started to crack in small ways. Ethan was still leading meetings, but now the questions were harder. Less theoretical. More urgent. Why is this happening? What changed? What did we remove? That last question mattered. But no one wanted to fully answer it. Because answering it meant admitting something uncomfortable. That not everything was unnecessary. That some of what I had built wasn't just legacy. It was load-bearing. By Thursday, clients started escalating. Not publicly. Not aggressively. Just enough to make internal pressure rise. Service delays. Missed processing windows. Unexplained inconsistencies. The kind of problems that don't look dramatic at first, but start to affect trust. And trust, once it shifts, doesn't come back easily. I got one more message that day from Mark. This is getting worse. Leadership says it's transition noise, but he stopped there. He didn't need to finish. Because I already knew what he was thinking. This wasn't transition noise. This was structure failing without its foundation. And I had been that foundation. That night, I sat alone for a long time. No TV, no distractions. Just thinking. Not about revenge. Not about being right. But about inevitability. Because this wasn't something I caused. It was something they revealed when they removed understanding from the system. And now it was slowly surfacing. By Friday, I knew the situation had moved past adjustment. It was no longer a smooth transition. It was instability. And instability always moves in one direction if no one understands it well enough to stop it. Still, I didn't intervene. Not because I wanted them to suffer, but because I'd already spent 13 years preventing this exact outcome. And they had chosen to believe that effort was replaceable. So I let them continue and waited because I knew something bigger was coming. Something that wouldn't stay quiet for long. It happened at 2:13 a.m. I remember the time because I was still awake. Not because I expected anything, but because sleep had become lighter that week. Like part of me was waiting, even if I wasn't admitting it. My phone lit up first. Then again. Then again. Multiple missed calls from unknown numbers and one I recognized immediately. Colin Reeves. That alone told me enough. Then the messages started coming in. Short. Broken sentences. System-wide failure. Transaction pipeline down. Clients affected globally. Need immediate escalation. No details. Just panic compressed into words. I sat up slowly, reading each message without rushing. Because I already knew what had happened. Not the exact trigger yet, but the pattern. When the hidden dependencies finally fail together, they don't give warnings. They collapse. I got a call again. This time from Mark. His voice was different. Not calm. Not controlled. Tired. Edward, are you awake? I am, I said. We can't isolate it, he said. It's spreading across multiple systems. Ethan thinks it's a network issue, but it's not matching anything we've seen before. I stayed quiet for a moment, because I had seen it before. Years ago. Same structure. Different pressure point. What did they change? I asked. He hesitated. A few batch processes. some cleanup work. Ethan removed what he called redundancies. There it was. Redundancies. That word again. Clean on paper. Dangerous in reality. Did anyone check the timing dependencies? I asked. Another pause. I don't think anyone fully understood them. That was the answer. Not that they couldn't fix it, that they didn't know what they were fixing. I could hear voices in the background through the call. Raised voices. Urgent discussions. Multiple people trying different things at once. None of it coordinated. None of it grounded. Just reaction. I could picture it clearly. The same room I had sat in weeks ago. Only now, the confidence was gone, replaced by urgency and uncertainty. Colin got on the call briefly. "Edward," he said, voice tight, "we need you to come in, or at least guide us through this. We're losing transactions every minute." I didn't answer immediately, because this was the moment everything had been building toward. Not in a dramatic way, but in a structural one. For 13 years, I had been the quiet layer between stability and failure. And now that layer was gone. "I can't fix something I'm not inside of anymore," I said finally. "That's not true," Colin said quickly. "You know the system better than anyone." That part was true, but incomplete. Knowing isn't the same as maintaining. And maintaining is what kept everything from falling apart. "I can consult," I said. Silence on the other end. Then Colin again. "What do you need?" That question changed everything. Because now, the system had value again. Not theoretical. Real. "I need a formal consulting agreement," I said calmly. "Short term. My rate is higher than before. And I decide the scope." There was a pause. A long one. I could almost hear them processing it. Not the technical part. The power shift. The realization that the person they had replaced was now the only one who could help them. Finally, Colin spoke again. "Send it over. We'll approve it. Simple. Fast. Urgent." I almost smiled. Because just a few weeks ago, I was a legacy cost. Now I was an emergency dependency. I got dressed slowly. No rush. No panic. Because I wasn't going back as an employee. I was going back as something else. When I arrived at the building later that night, everything felt different. Security let me through without question. People I used to work with barely made eye contact. The atmosphere was heavy. Controlled chaos. Ethan was in a conference room with 3 monitors open, speaking quickly, trying to explain what he thought was happening. But he was guessing. I could see it immediately. Not because he was unskilled, but because he had never lived inside the system long enough to feel it. Colin saw me first. He walked over fast. "We're glad you came," he said. No arrogance now. No presentation tone. Just relief. I nodded once and walked past him, straight into the problem. Because now, for the first time since I left, they were listening, and I knew exactly where to start. The conference room looked different at 3:10 a.m. Not physically. The same glass walls. Same long table. Same glowing screens. But the energy was gone. What was left was pressure. People moving too fast. Voices overlapping. Coffee cups everywhere. Empty chairs that used to belong to confident decisions. Now there was uncertainty sitting in every seat. Ethan was still at the center, talking quickly, pointing at graphs, trying to explain what he believed the system should be doing, not what it was actually doing. That difference mattered now, because theory doesn't fix collapse. Reality does. Colin stood near the back of the room, watching everything fall apart without interrupting. And then he saw me fully step in. I didn't rush. I didn't announce myself. I just looked at the dashboard. One screen, then another. Then I spoke. "Stop changing settings," I said. Everyone paused. Even Ethan. He turned toward me like he had been pulled out of his own explanation. "We're trying to stabilize," he started. "You're guessing," I said calmly. Not insulting, just factual. That shut him up faster than anger ever could. I walked closer to the main screen, looked at the batch pipeline logs, then the timing sequences, then the dependency chain. It was exactly what I expected. Not one big failure. A chain reaction of small decisions that no one fully understood anymore. They had removed something they thought was unnecessary. But it wasn't. It was just invisible. Until it broke. Colin stepped closer. "Can you fix it?" That question again. But now it meant something different. Not hope. Responsibility. I looked at him for a moment. Then I said, "Yes." But not immediately. Because fixing it wasn't the problem. understanding what they broke was. I pulled up a chair and started working. Slow, methodical, no panic, because panic is what got them here. Ethan watched quietly now, not interrupting. For the first time, he wasn't trying to explain anything, just observing. That shift told me more than anything he had said all night. Hours passed like that. One adjustment, then another, then testing, then waiting, then correction. The system didn't recover all at once. It never does. It stabilized in layers, like it had been built. At around 5:40 a.m., the first green indicators started returning. Transaction flow normalized. Delayed queues cleared. System errors reduced. Not gone, but contained. Colin let out a breath I think he had been holding since midnight. Ethan leaned back in his chair, silent. No celebration, just exhaustion and realization. When things finally settled, Colin walked over again. This time slower, different posture, less control in his voice. "What do we owe you?" he asked. I looked at him, not immediately answering, because that question wasn't about money. It was about understanding, and they were only now beginning to see the gap. "You don't owe me anything," I said finally. Then I paused. "But you should understand what just happened here." He nodded slightly. I continued. "You didn't replace a role," I said. "You removed knowledge you never documented. You optimized something you never understood." Ethan looked down at the table. For the first time all night. No defense. No argument. Just silence. Colin rubbed his face. "We didn't think it would collapse like this." I nodded. "That's the problem," I said. "You didn't think at all." The room didn't respond, because there was nothing to say to that. Later, the paperwork came quickly, faster than anything else they had done in months. Consulting agreement. Short term. High rate. Exactly what I had requested. No negotiation now. No discussion. Just approval. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 13 years, I had been managed. Now, in a single night, I had become the only reason their system still existed. I signed it quietly, not to return, but to finish what they had started. When I stood up to leave that room at sunrise, Colin stopped me. "Edward," he said. I turned slightly. He hesitated. "I don't think we understood what you were doing here." I looked at him for a moment. Then I said the only honest thing I had left. "I know," and I walked out, not as an employee, not as a replacement, but as the person they should have listened to before everything broke. The next few weeks were quiet, not peaceful, controlled, the kind of quiet that comes after something almost breaks beyond repair. I worked under the consulting agreement, but I didn't stay inside the company's rhythm anymore. I set limits, fixed what needed to be fixed, explained what could be explained, and stopped where responsibility ended. It didn't question it. Not anymore, because they had already seen what happens when understanding is removed from a system built on hidden structure. Ethan stayed on the team, but something had changed in him. He asked fewer confident questions, more careful ones, not because he lost intelligence, but because he had seen the difference between theory and reality. Colin avoided big speeches now. Meetings were shorter, decisions slower, more cautious, and for the first time in years, the system had something it didn't have before. Respect, not for hierarchy, for dependency. One afternoon, I was reviewing logs when Ethan walked in quietly. He didn't sit right away, just stood near the door. "I need to ask you something," he said. I didn't look up immediately. "Go ahead." He hesitated, then said, "How did you know it would fail like that?" I finally turned, because that was the real question. Not about code, not about systems, about judgment. I thought for a moment before answering. Because I lived with its weaknesses, I said, every day, for years. I didn't just build it. I carried its flaws. He nodded slowly, like that made sense now, even if it came too late. After a moment, he said something I didn't expect. "I think we thought experience could be replaced by structure." I leaned back slightly. "That's what most companies think," I said. He didn't argue, because he had seen the result. The company stabilized over time. Losses stopped growing. Clients returned slowly. Trust didn't come back quickly, but it didn't disappear further either. Things found a new balance. Smaller, more careful, less confident than before. I didn't stay forever. That was never the plan. One morning, I signed off for the last time. No meeting, no announcement, just closure. Colin tried to talk to me before I left. "I want to say thank you," he said. I nodded. Just don't repeat it, I replied. He understood what I meant. Because this wasn't about one person. It was about a mistake that felt efficient on paper, but wasn't in reality. As I walked out of the building for the final time, I didn't feel revenge. That's not what it was. It was something quieter, clearer. A simple truth settling in after too many years of being ignored. Value doesn't disappear when you replace it. It reveals itself. And sometimes, it only becomes visible when it's already gone. I got in my car that morning and didn't look back. Not because I was angry, but because I no longer needed to stay where I was only understood after the damage had already been done. And that was enough.